my name is Susan Norwell, co-founder of Rett University, educational specialist, and really excited to have this webinar about academics and the complex learner, because I think oftentimes our complex kiddos are left out of learning academics, or they are tortured by having to do them in ways that are not exactly accessible for them or conducive to them being able to learn them. So I'm pretty excited about tonight. And then Courtney, you can introduce yourself.
Hi guys, I am Courtney Barnum. I am also an educational specialist with Rett University and a prior special ed teacher. I taught in the 8th largest district in the U.S. For 20 years and have since left and am now doing what I'm really passionate about. And I'm very excited about this too, because I think, it's interesting. I actually saw somebody last night and they were talking about, they had just gotten a young lady with Rett in their school. And they were like, oh, she can't do anything. And I'm like, we're teaching our girls to read and write. And they're like, wait, how? And I was like, it's very possible. And she's like, I just don't see it. I'm like, well, you know what? Why don't you give me a call and we'll chat about it, because it's very possible. So.
Hey, I'm going to correct something you said. I think you were passionate about teaching when you were in the classroom also.
Yes.
I just think that because you took everything you learned and poured it into that classroom. I just think that the classroom started to be restraining for you in terms of what you could do, and you kind of grew beyond it. But I saw you as a passionate teacher. I was a passionate teacher when I was in the classroom, but again, I got constrained by the system, which is why I got out of the system. But so you want to hit the next page, and we'll go through our at some point. We should probably talk about that. I love this quote. Before they will dare to take risks to learn, students must trust there is no penalty for not knowing. I just think that is so important for our kiddos that are complex learners, because oftentimes our complex learners are anxious because their bodies aren't doing what they wanted to do, or they don't have enough words to express themselves. And now if they think they're making a mistake and we make a big deal out of it, it's like, okay. And so I always say, if you don't know, please let me know, because yay, I'm so excited, because then I could teach you something new.
No, I agree. And it's very interesting, because I remember listening to one of Joe Picard's podcasts that she had been on.
The one on inclusion?
Yes. And she talked about how she felt like she had to prove herself every year when she went into a classroom. And I think a lot of our girls and boys feel that as well when they go into classrooms, that they have to prove that they belong there. They have
to prove that the data that is going with them into that classroom, like the teacher the year before said they knew all their letters, and then that sped teacher the following year is going to test whether they know all their letters. And I'm like, how does anybody get ahead if they're always guessing what the last teacher said they could do? It's like, do we not have any faith in our fellow professionals that this kid, yes, can do this stuff? And if you can't get him to do something like that, then maybe you need to figure out what you're doing wrong, not what the kiddo is doing wrong. That's my sense that whole debacle.
Yes, but when I saw that quote, I thought that was absolutely perfect, especially for
that's a good one. And really what people need to know is that when I was teaching, and I was teaching a variety of kids, not just kids with Rett, obviously, the kids that struggled a lot with learning to read were your ED kids, emotionally disturbed kids, ED, that had mental health issues that were revolved around anxiety. Because reading is a risk-taking adventure. You have to say the word out loud and try it out, see if it makes sense to you. Does it sound right? Does the teacher say yes? Keep going. It's a very much of a risk-taking adventure. And I saw lots of kids that were not good readers, not because they didn't know letters and sounds, or not because they didn't have good auditory processing or good language. It was because they were so anxious they wouldn't take the risk to learn it. So we don't ever want to be the it in the anxiety. We don't want to be the causation of it. Not to say that there aren't times, and I'm going to say this out loud and up front. If you're going to teach somebody to read and write, I don't care who it is, you have to help them manage their anxiety, not ignore it, and not step over it. but you can't reduce it. You can't take it totally away. The only way you can take anxiety totally away in the learning process is just have them do the same things over and over again. And that usually makes people bored. So there's going to be a certain amount of anxiety. So let's go on past that topic that I'm just stuck my foot right into there. So what are the supports that our kids need in order to access education and more complex learning? And we have to think about the difference between input and output. So I do think that for our kids that we're working with that have really complex disabilities like Rett, like autism, like Down syndrome, like you could go through the CP. I have some kids that have CP with CBI. Is that the output is what creates more of the issues. I'm not saying always, but I would say for the most part, the kids that I see, it's an output issue. So apraxia really can be detrimental to output. And then because of the apraxia, we've got the anxiety. So we use something called soft questioning, like I'm wondering what, or what letter do you think comes next, or I'm looking at this word and what could it be, or how about if you read this and then we'll figure out the picture, versus get the, find the, do the. Visual changes in the material. I think we've done 2 webinars on CBI. I think on the milder end of things are kids that just have visual processing issues where visual clutter is distracting or difficult. I don't know how much people really take a look at the visual presentation to help kids who have visual issues. And we can see those kids. Those kids are the ones that fleetingly look at their device and then look away, and then fleetingly look at their device and look away, and then fleetingly look at their device. If they had really good processing, they'd be like burrowed into that thing looking all the way around. And I think that we need to figure out a better way to present materials that kind of grab their attention. I think this front loading is really important, and you put that in there, Courtney, so I'm going to let you speak to that, but I love front loading.
I love front loading, and it was one of those things, when I was teaching, if I had a child who I knew had anxiety or needed that extra time, whether it was to go on their communication device or whatever, I would front load. I would let them know what the question was or what I was going to be expecting of them a couple people ahead so that they could get their body prepped. And I've seen it with some of our teachers that we work with our kiddos with Rett is, I had one teacher go, is it okay if I tell her a couple? And I was like, please, because that gives her time to get herself together and be able to do what she needs to do. If that way you can, let them know, hey, by the way, I'm going to be asking you, your question is this, or you're going to be reading this part, or you're going to be doing this, whatever the task is. Or letting them know even what's going to be happening next. Okay, we're going to finish this up and then we're going to go here. And it's just giving them that chance to kind of get their bodies together, especially with that apraxia and that anxiety, to kind of go, oh, okay, I know I need to get this ready. Or on my communication device, if I'm choosing to answer with my communication device or my flip books, I can go ahead and start getting that prepared so it's all ready without having all those friends who maybe if you're in a small group are staring at you, waiting for you to do it.
Yeah, and I think that we can also broaden out that idea of front loading. So one of the things that I've been struggling with lately is that some of my kids are now really pushing up in terms of their reading level. They're getting into more complex books. They're getting into more complex fiction books in terms of having to inference. And I think, so I'm reading this book about reindeer are real. No, this book about bats. That was the book that made it really come to the forefront. And I looked at the little kid, the kid I was reading with, and said, do you know what nocturnal is? Now, this is the 3rd grade child. Most kids by 1st, 2nd grade would know what nocturnal is due to the curriculum that's in the classroom. And she was like, no. And I realized how important it was for me to front load the vocabulary and front load that background knowledge, because now she's going to be at a distinct disadvantage when she reads things in this book. Because when you read, the more background knowledge, the easier it is for you. So if I pick up a book and I read a book about reading, man, I've got so much information about reading. Reading a book about reading is pretty easy for me. But if I read a book about rocket science, I'm going to tell you that I would have to read a sentence, stop, go back and get my dictionary, go back and read the sentence 3 or 4 times because I don't have the background knowledge to really understand that content. And so I think when kids are nonverbal, they're not using, conventional language, and people haven't been as aware of how intact their receptive language is, people end up like talking down or babying them or not informing them about things so that they might read them. The book, Stella Luna, which is a great book about a bat, by the way, is a nonfiction book or a fiction book about that. But really not go over, tell me a little bit about bats. So I just think that front loading can be so much. I use it when I move a kiddo from reading on the Toby to reading on the iPad, and we switch over to them just tracking on the iPad in something called Voice Stream, is I actually have them read the page on the Toby, then read the page on the new apparatus, read the page on the Toby, then read it on the new apparatus. I'm kind of front loading the experience, giving them what they've been successful with before I launch them into the new. So we can think about front loading really a lot of ways. We could probably do a whole webinar on front loading. Because of expressive language issues, our loved ones really need some support in the output. So they need soft tech, they need choices, partner-assisted scanning, processing time. And I'm going to say about partner-assisted scanning as I pick up the yes-no board. So this is a yes-no board that was adapted. Typically I have icons here, but I noticed that my kiddo was really drawn to the yellow face on the yes, and it was distracting to her. She kept saying yes, yes, so I just made them boring. So you've got the words yes and no, and that solved that whole problem. But when we're doing partner-assisted scanning, we really need to think about errorless in the beginning. Do you want to sit next to Joey or Susie? Is it Joey, yes or no? Susie, yes or no? They say 2 yeses. We say, sorry, you gave me 2 yeses. I need 1 yes, 1 no. And it doesn't matter. There's no right and wrong about what they're choosing. We don't teach somebody partner-assisted scan and use it for high-stake assessment. We're not going to do that to find out what letters they know in the alphabet if they haven't even learned how to use this tool. Think about asking kids to write with the ABC flip book before they've used it to even just play with letters and scribble. It's the same idea. And I tend to write a goal around partner-assisted scan, an errorless goal that they will give a clear, given a regulated body, access to a yes-no board, supported seating, that the child will make a recognizable yes or no in an errorless situation. All I'm looking for is, do I get a good yes that I know is a yes and a no that's a no? And there's nothing right or wrong about it. That's the criteria, is a readable yes and no in an errorless situation. And so I just think that oftentimes we jump right into the high-stake testing stuff before we teach them the process. And in Rett, in particular, or any disorder that has motor planning issues, they have to learn the process first. They have to learn the plan. And if they don't learn the plan first, you are mixing learning the plan with learning the content, and that's really inappropriate.
Right. And I want to comment on the processing time. I usually count about 10 to 10 with my kiddos when we're doing things like that. But I have noticed with like some of my kiddos, or with some of my young ladies, I shouldn't say, when I'm doing something a little harder or something a little new, I have to give them a little bit extra processing time because they are really thinking about it. So, have kind of a standard number, but be aware of, okay, we're asking something new, or this is a little bit harder than what we've done before, to give them that a little bit of extra processing time. One of my clients, she's now in her early 20s, but when I worked with her at 18, she was the one who kind of taught me this, because we were kind of pushing up the level of what she was doing. And her yes was always so quick, and a couple of seconds. Well, she started changing her yes because the rigor had gotten harder. And so she would put her head down for a second, and her teachers assumed, oh, that's her saying no. And then her communication partner and I were watching her, and we're like, wait a second. And then, because she would kind of then bring her head up and look right at us for yes. And we're like, so I was like, are you taking some extra time to think about it? And she immediately gave me a yes. And we're like, oh, okay, so her yes had changed a little bit because the rigor had gotten harder. And just like, I don't know about you guys, but when I have to think about things, when Susan's teaching me something new, or it's, I'm getting ready to take some new college courses, or taking this math course I have to take right now for my certification, I'm having to do some extra processing time because the thinking, that's not my forte with math. So, make sure that you kind of give, looking at what you're doing with that processing time.
Yeah, and we also have to take into account, their breath being held for them, dystonia, all of these factors. So it's really hard to have a set number in your head. I think the thing I say all the time is, I'll wait for you. I'll wait till you're ready. And a lot of times it helps just to have the yes/no board here, but then put it down until they're really ready to look at it and engage with it, because sometimes they come up and they might look a certain way, but that's really not what they want. They're just trying to organize their body. So this is I think it's like a fingerprint. I always say when I meet a new family, and they're like peppering me with a million questions while I'm trying to work with the kiddo, and I always say, if you could just give me a little bit, I have to get in rhythm with your child or in rhythm with your adult, because I think there is a rhythm to each kiddo, each adult that's like their fingerprint. It's unique to them. And when you start to get outside that rhythm, then I think you get, they feel unsafe. I have some kids that have a really slow rhythm where I can push them a little bit to get a little faster so they stay in rhythm. But you better know what their rhythm is to start with. So supports that help with input and output. These are like not maybes, and I write most of these into every single goal. And so you'll see these written into our goals if Rett U is writing goals. Given a regulated body, proper or supported positioning, availability of both high and soft tech, partner-assisted scan. If they're doing some kind of an answer that requires a right/wrong, it's going to say how many things they have to scan. Kids in the beginning should be scanning 2 items, then 3. It's really, if you look at Reading A to Z, which I use a lot because I think they really have a great lesson plan that helps people with reading, but if you look at what neurotypical kids are doing in kindergarten, they're reading a book that has 2 choices for the quiz. And when they're in first grade, it's kind of like 3 choices. And it's not until like middle of second grade reading, end of second grade reading level that they're getting 4 choices. And sometimes we give our kids 4 choices when they're 4, expecting them to be able to hold that all in their head. Again, if we want to work on working memory, fine, but let's not have it be something that they have to have a right or wrong answer. Let's go through maybe all the desserts we have, and, they're going to pick one of them, and any one of them is fine by me, especially if it's chocolate. So I just think that we have to kind of be reasonable in our knowledge of what we're expecting from neurotypical kids. And I see in classes oftentimes that they're asking them to do more than you would expect somebody their age that's neurotypical and can speak and use their hands. The other aspect, I think, is this modeling part. I think it's really helpful for everyone who's got motor planning issues to see the how of what you're doing. And that means that you have to do it. There's a great math teacher by the name of Marilyn Burns, and she would say, first you do it, then you do it with them, and 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 then you gradually release responsibility for them to be doing it on their own. It isn't, okay, I just taught you how to add, now go home and do 10 addition problems. No, because they're probably just going to practice mistakes because they haven't really learned it. That guided learning is so important, and the modeling is so important for language, for reading, for writing, for everything. That I put that a lot into goals because I don't want people to forget. It's interesting, this regulated body, I'm working with a school right now, and her classroom has a lot of kids with autism that are loud. The teacher was saying how she was having a great deal of difficulty with the assessment. She did really poorly. And I said, so talk to me about the classroom. She says, well, this training, and this kid was this, and this kid, and I went, hold on. The first thing that it says in that goal is given a regulated body. If she's not regulated, you cannot assess her. You cannot. Because now you're going against the IEP, and that's why it's written that way. Kiddo better be regulated. I don't care if they're sick, they don't get asked high-stake questions that are going to be, whether they met their goal or not. You have to find a different time. Find a quieter place.
And I also have started including soft questioning in the goals when I'm writing them, because of the very fact that I have watched some of my kiddos literally shut down. Like, when they're peppered with questions. One of my young ladies, her speech therapist or the intern, not realizing it, immediately started with a bunch of questions over and over and over, and she finally looked at her and said, "This is boring," and turned away. And it was her way of saying, you're stressing me out. I can't and so we're like, okay, better way to say that. Let's work on, better way to say that. But that was her way of saying, you're asking me too many questions, and my anxiety is going through the roof, and I can't do that. And so I've started putting that soft questioning into the thing too, is modeling and soft questioning. And when they ask what is soft questioning, telling them what that exactly means with our kiddos, because most classrooms are, what is this? What is this? What do you see? Da 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 da. And it's that quick thing, and our kids need that soft questioning.
Yeah, and I think too that I think sometimes people who are trying to capture the attention of our kiddos have a lot of animation, and I respect that a lot, because I think that animation is not a bad thing. Obviously, because I do a lot of it. But when you're animated, sometimes you tend to speed up. And if you have a kiddo who you're kind of worried about them getting upset or falling apart, sometimes you go faster, hoping you can get stuff in before they do that. The problem is that's works the opposite. I have kids that say to me, "Too slow bad." I said, "I know, I'm slow. It's true. I'm going to read the book slowly. I'm not going to be a movie and go read. I'm not a walking, talking video. I'm going to have a conversation about the book." I have a little girl in New Zealand, and their speech therapist, I was doing a session, the speech therapist was watching, the kid was telling me I was slow, and I went, "I know. I am." And I will tell you that slowing people down a little so that they communicate in a reciprocal fashion, you kind of play with that. You're slow one page, and you need to speed up the next page so they don't go berserky on you, and then you get slow again. But if we don't get that rhythm, find out what their rhythm is, and then figure out where we want to be and how we can kind of tweak it, we're going to have a little bit of trouble there. So anyways, and I will tell you that nobody learns to read or write by going too fast. They just don't. The beautiful thing about learning is that nobody can take it away from you. And I really think that, for me personally, that when I stop learning is when I should stop doing this. And I know Courtney feels the same way. We're constantly all the time talking about our clients and what we're doing and how we can do what we can do better and what we can do differently. There are nights where I stay awake thinking about such matters. But in terms of academic choices, we can stand really firmly on the fact that communication and literacy are just non-negotiable. And when I have a family that is deciding about a class placement, I give them literacy-based questions. What is your literacy curriculum? How do you teach writing? How do you teach a nonverbal child to read? And it's amazing how many answers come back as, well, we're just doing a functional curriculum here. Oh, life skills. And how are you going to teach somebody life skills who can't use their hands? That's the next question I ask, is how are you going to teach them how to make their bed if they cannot use their hands? So I firmly believe that the strong suit of our kids with Rett, I'm going to step away from autism for a while and step away from all the other disorders. I'm going to talk specifically about Rett. I think their strong suit is education, is learning content and learning literacy and learning reading and writing. Academics is where they shine. You put them in a life skills program and they're getting a lot of hand over hand, and that's where I see people falling asleep. So I do think that if individuals aren't taught to read and write, the communication is more difficult, and if they're not taught to communicate, then reading and writing is more difficult. I think those two things feed each other. There's tons of research on the fact that happens. Now, I do think we have to be conscious of the fact that our individuals with a complex disability such as Rett absolutely need to be literate about their world, not just literate. So the example of reading a book about bats and not understanding they're nocturnal. We have to be literate about our world, that bats are nocturnal. There are animals that actually come out at night. We sleep during the day. other animals sleep or we sleep during the night and other animals sleep during the day. Kind of like how that works. The difference between animals that eat plants and eat meat. What is that all about? Scientific things like, the water cycle. Like, here we have water coming down from the sky in the form of rain. It goes into the ocean, evaporates, come back up, and we have the same water cycling. That's why it's really important not to throw away your plastic bottles, even if you're recycling them with water in it, because that's bad. So, social studies. It's important to know what's going on in the world as much as they can tolerate, as much as they can understand. And so I always feel that when our kids kind of get no science, no social studies, I'm not that worried about them being mathematicians. To be honest, there's only so much you can do in a day when kids need to sleep and have PT and OT and have slower responses. I'd at least like them to understand the language of math and the processes of math. I don't really need them doing any computation. So my main focus on any IEP is going to be reading, writing, and communication, which includes then social. They've got to be talking with somebody, reading with somebody, writing to an audience. It's not an audience of one. And I think it really helps when they see other people reading, writing, and communicating that they want to do the same. So I don't know, Courtney, you got anything to add? I'm like blithering on.
But it's interesting that you talked about the math because, literacy, as we said, is not just, as you said, is not just about reading and writing. And I'm actually taking a course right now to recertify my teaching certificate. And this is actually one of the standards on it is communication is important for problem solving as it allows students to experience a variety of strategies and thought processes. Using journaling to allow students to learn how to justify solutions, explain and understand the steps of an algorithm, and to use mathematics vocabulary appropriately. This is one of the this is part of the standards in the state that I live in. So this is part of we do have children. I know we have some kiddos who love math and it's their thing. God bless them, because math is not my strong point. They can still do some of the stuff, but it's more about that communication part of it. They need to be literate to communicate about what they're doing. They need to be literate. They need to look at the language of what they are being expected, so that they can explain it. I was reading one of the parts of this course, and it was explaining how the student was explaining why they got their answer that they did. And I will tell you honestly, I'm reading through the problem. Math is not my strong suit. And I was going, I would have never been able to explain that. I would not have been, I know how to get A to Z, but I don't know how to explain how to get there to get
We
A
never
to Z.
We never had to when we were taking math. I mean, my age, it was just, there was an answer you got to. That was it. Yeah.
Right. So it's making sure that, when we're talking about our students and we're looking at literacy, and yes, we're looking at, especially as they're getting older and we have kids and, we have young ladies and men in high school and things like that. What are we looking at? Yeah, we want to make sure we're still doing that literacy part of it, but what do they need to be literate at in their world so that they can have a well-rounded world around them and not just be, focused on one thing?
I really have had a epiphany probably in the last, since COVID, because I'm doing so many remotes and I've got adults. I've got these 20-year-olds, 35-year-olds, that obviously didn't have the same experiences that our kids have now. They're getting their first devices at a later age, but I have this woman at 35 who was fully included. I know for sure they probably had no idea what to do with her, but she was sitting in those classrooms. And we just read a book called The Other Side. It's a great story. I highly recommend it to anybody. It's about a fence that runs down the middle of a town, and black families are on one side, white families on the other, and how the kids bridge this fence, the kids. It's a really beautiful story. And I said to her at the end, what do you think the theme of this story is? And with her spelling and word prediction, you get the first three letters, you're probably going to get the word. She wrote people becoming friends with each other. Now, that's an amazing sentence to write. I mean, for anybody. But somebody who had so little school experience that was useful to her, it says to me, everything she learned, everything she experienced, everything she heard, everything she saw she took in and she held it, and she's been waiting 35 years to have somebody show her the way to get it out. Wow. Wow. So I defy any doctor, any neurologist, any geneticist who says that this is a cognitive disorder, because that is impossible if she has a cognitive disorder. It's impossible. And so for me, writing has become the it. The minute the kids are reading things or listening to stories with me, I'm having them write about it. And in the beginning, it doesn't make any sense. And they're just picking letters, and I'm like, oh, what if you're trying to tell me this? Are you telling, like somebody the other day, we're reading this story about the aquarium, and I said, okay, I made a big tank. Now, what animal are you going to put in the tank? And she wrote DFN. Dolphin. And I said, oh, are you putting in the otters? No. You putting in the, I don't know what else I use, for another example, whatever. The whales? No. Are you putting in a dolphin? Yes. Like you, silly Susan, you should have known that, because I gave you a DF and an N. So I just feel like, as much as COVID was a bad thing for me because of the people that came my way, it was a good growing experience for me. And I just feel like I'm supercharged about writing and reading and expanding that so that people can really go from idea out. Not idea, look for it on my talker, idea out, and that's what writing does. And so we need to be thinking about, Courtney and I need to be thinking, all teachers need to be thinking, if I'm reading this book, what background knowledge, I send notes to parents going, okay, what background knowledge do they have about this? Have you ever experienced this? Have you ever been to an aquarium? Have you ever been, because if you have, I need to know what information they have, because it's hard to know what they know. And so they could be reading a book going, what the heck is a tank? This says every page, there's a whale in this tank. If they've never seen a big tank. So I use a lot of video, too, in my books just to make sure that background knowledge comes alive. And I do pre-teaching about that front loading. So that just is something that I think we have to take a look at when we're looking at academics. And so we may say in an inclusion environment, okay, we want this kid to go in for blah, 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 that's science. And we know how fast a third or fourth grade class whips through science. So I have one third grader in science right now. They're doing soil. I got the soil as a topic 2 months ago, and I have been front loading that soil. I know a whole lot about dirt, more than I ever wanted to know in my life. We now have some background knowledge about dirt. So when she goes into that classroom, she's not just having to process what the teacher's saying and figure out what it goes with. She knows what it goes with because she has some background knowledge. So,
and remember, this literacy and problem solving and all that good stuff. I do believe our kiddos need to learn how to problem solve, because I think that is such an important. I have worked with a variety of children, and I have been blessed to work with some really awesome young men for the past few years who are teenagers with autism, very limited verbal, and they are so prompt dependent for everything, because that's the way they've been taught. And so trying to undo that, because trying to teach them how to problem solve and, okay, I need to do this in my reading, I need to do this in my math or whatever, and getting that. So start teaching them those problem solving steps to identify, define, explore, action, look back, figure it out, and not wait for, and I think in some of our girls too, and our boys, I think I see the same thing, is they're kind of just like, they're afraid to be wrong. So they don't want to step outside the box, or they wait for that. And so again, trying to give them that safe zone where they feel comfortable enough to take those risks and try something new. And again, it all ties back to that communication piece. So just making sure that when we're talking about literacy, we're not just, okay, we can read, we can write. We're making sure that we're including that problem solving, including that communication, and creating a well-rounded learner that,
So I think, I know what you're saying. So I've been doing this vocab stuff with my kids before they read a story that has analogies. So we're reading about, reindeer, or reindeer are real, or whatever. And it's like, this is to this as this is to this. And so now they're learning the vocabulary to the story, but they're having to think about relationship between words. So are these two words opposites? Are these two words the same? Are these two words, one is part of another word? I remember to get into graduate school, I had to take the Miller's analogy. It's like 30 analogies. Man, that really kicked my butt. That was like a really hard analogy test. But I think that analogies make people think about stuff in a different way. But isn't that going to really broaden not only their vocabulary to support the book, but the way they think about vocabulary, the way they think about words? And so I just am committed to expanding thinking. And I do think that when you expand thinking, you give kids more confidence. Now, I'm gonna come back to the original thing I said though, is when we set these expectations, with the knowledge that as we push them forward and higher and onto new things, there's going to be the anxiety kickback. There just is. And that's where language really comes in handy. I had a kid just falling apart the other day. I was doing a consult with her school. She was just screaming and really upset. And actually, I should probably play that whole video for just a webinar and just let it play. Because I'm just talking to her and going, oh, I know, this is just so hard and I'm feeling so bad. I mean, I'm just going back and forth and she's throwing stuff out that she's so mad and she's just so upset. And we're just going back and forth and back and forth. And at the end, when we were talking about it, the teacher said, after she was out of the room, like she was like not giving it too good of a chance of us getting anything done. You know what? In like 15 minutes, which seemed like about an hour, she settled down and she did some great work. But if we had just, put her someplace because she was being loud, it just wouldn't have worked for this kid. This kid really needed to be talked through what was going on, what could we do. The faster and louder she got, the slower and quieter I got. So I'm modeling like the antithesis of what she's doing. I'm just staying right here, just level as can be. And it was like this turnaround moment. And that affect cueing, that getting in there with them and talking them through the anxiety is way different than saying, we're not going to do this because it's too hard for you. Or we're going to stop because you're so upset. The minute we stop when they're upset, we've taught them learned helplessness, and that screaming gets them out of doing hard stuff. And that's the balance we always walk. I'm about easy, hard. Even in anything I'm doing, it's like, okay, I'm going to ask a tough question, then I give them a softball. And here's the hard one, and here's a softball, because I'm not going to stress somebody so much that I spend a half hour having to talk them off the ledge. But if you have to spend a half hour talking them off the ledge, you've taught a lot of problem solving.
And that's what we have a question of how do you keep the kids motivated to problem solve and do keep asking questions. Sometimes I find my daughter hesitant to try to wait to see if someone will do it for her. And that I will say that our kids are very adept at that. And unfortunately, that's kind of a learned behavior, I think, especially when they've been in school, because they get they're so cute. Okay, well, yeah, they're cute, but they're also going to grow up and they're also available to learn. So what I have done is, like Susan says, I kind of pepper it with soft and hard. And I will talk to my kiddos and say, okay, you know what, let's try this together. And I do a lot, you do a lot of that, again, front loading, you do a lot of that. Okay, we're going to do these. We do it again and again and again and again and again. And then when I do start to release them into something where I'm asking, maybe having them problem solve themselves, I will give them something very easy to problem solve that I know that they can do. Because it's also that confidence thing of like, okay, you know what? This is a little bit hard for me, but I'm going to take a second and I'm going to sound out the word. Like I have a young lady that I'm working with who, she knows her letters. She knows her letter sounds. She's 14. She's got a lot of learned helplessness because she was kind of, she's going to fall asleep. And so we've gotten through okay, I'm not going to sleep anymore during our sessions. We're actually doing work because there's a consequence when we sleep. But now it's getting her, she'll do the letter sounds if I help her. And so we're doing a lot of, okay, we're going to do these together. But every once in a while I'll slide in, okay, well, why don't you try to do this sound, blend these sounds together by yourself. and just like one or two, and then she'll do it. And I'll be like, well, look at, and get her to do that, because it's that gaining confidence in their self and what they're capable of doing. And it can, I'm going to say this, it can sometimes be hard when you're sometimes battling against a school team or things that don't always see the potential in your child. And I think that can make it a difficult thing, because they're doing it for them, or they're, I don't want to say,
or they don't do it, or they can't.
Right.
So I've an experience where I'm working with this kiddo right now who spent an entire year in a school where, even though I trained him at the beginning, they just didn't do anything they were supposed to do. And so they just felt she couldn't do anything. And so now I'm just saying, there's no placement for her right now. So now I'm picking up those extra hours of trying to fill in. And what I have to say is, well, I'll wait for you, because she's used to people giving up thinking she can't do it, instead of waiting. And sometimes I'm waiting for 3 minutes to try. She picks up her head and she gives me the answer. And I'm like, okay, let's move on. And I think sometimes you have to know your kid well enough to know who you wait for that long and who you don't wait for that long. But I think waiting is respectful.
I agree.
Waiting till you give me an answer. I don't care if it's the right answer or the wrong answer, to tell you the truth. As much as you give me an answer. I can shape a wrong answer into a right answer. I can help with that, but you need to be able to answer, take that risk.
Right. And they need to answer. And it's going back to that. They've got to trust you to feel safe to you to take those risks. And that's the other part of it. And we see that all the time in the schools, and I'm from school, I worked in schools for a long time. And unfortunately, I think sometimes we don't build that relationship and understanding that our children who are nonverbal, if they don't have trust, if they can't be safe with you, they're not going to give you their best, because they're afraid to. I saw that, I learned that with being my sister's sister, and I took that into my classroom, and I'd have my students doing things that like no other teacher could get them to do, and people be like, how did you do that? They feel safe to take that risk and try something new, or to step outside of their boxes, just like we have to feel safe to step outside of our comfort zones. They have to feel safe, and they have to know that it's a safe environment. So, again, it's providing that communication and providing all those different aspects to create a safe environment where they feel capable to take the risks and feel safe to take the risks. So.
All right. We're keeping people.
Yeah, sorry.
All right.
Go ahead.
Here are supports are necessary. So this is kind of like to just, kind of
bring it all back.
Give you a summary. Bring it all back. So supports are necessary for them to show what they know. And we have to take a look at both input and output. For some kids, there is the visual input that can be an issue. Typically, it's not auditory in Rett at all. But output is definitely affected. Literacy and communication, when we're looking at goals, I look at IEPs. I got one the other day that had like 8 goals about identifying body parts, and I'm like, what? Where are the literacy goals here? Where are the literacy goals? More ways that we can be literate besides learning to read. So we have to look at the background knowledge and what they're being exposed to and learning in the classroom. And the other thing is like, I really dislike when my kids are included in science, but there's no expectation that they're going to be assessed on what they're learning. I don't care if they don't have to take the 50-question test or any of that, but you know what? You're in this class to learn about soil. Here are 3 things we want you to learn, and at the end of the unit, you're going to be assessed on whether you know them. I think that's important. I think that's putting the responsibility on them to be in the classroom actually learning, not in there watching the other kids like it's a movie. I think that's really important. There is way more to academics than drill and testing, way more. That drill and testing should be the minimal. This should be the tiniest bit of what we're doing. Teaching, reasoning, doing it with them, modeling, giving them experiences, it should be the bulk of what we're doing. And being able to communicate what they've learned is really important and very empowering. At the end of every session, I talk about what a child has learned and what we've done so that they can learn how to create that narrative about what they've done. And it's really neat because they will come back to me, some of them, the next session and talk about what we did. And that makes me like, so happy. So happy. So,
And very my favorite thing is being able to communicate what they've learned is so important, and it's so empowering to them. Being able to tell you something, that they've learned. Like when I was working with one of my young ladies today, and every time she got an answer right, her smile, like I said to mom, I wanted to bottle it up, and because it just brought me so much joy because she was so excited she got it right. And I said, that is like, please keep that joy forever, because it's empowering to her, and it was empowering to me as her coach and her person. It made me so happy to see her enjoying learning so much. So, being able to communicate what they know, that is so important. So making sure that we've got ways for them to communicate, whether it be soft tech or high tech. And that's the other, we don't always have to be on that device when it comes to academics and things like that. So, if there are any subjects or ideas that we have not yet covered, or that you guys would like us to see, review or things like that, please let us know. We are here to support. You guys can email us. And I love this quote that I found: literacy is the most basic currency of the knowledge economy. And so, isn't it a great quote? I was like, I love that. So, you can reach myself or Susan Norwell at rett-u.org, or Courtney at gp2c.org. If you guys have any questions, you guys can go ahead and turn on your cameras now, and we will happily take some quick questions. Oh, we got one in the chat. Hold on. Oh, thank you. Oh, Sarah said thank you. Well, we hope everybody enjoyed, and we hope everybody, like I said, if you have any questions or anything like that, we thank you guys for coming. We'll be doing our next web chat in about a month. Look for the dates, and on our Facebook or on our Instagram. And we really appreciate it. And again, if you have any questions, our emails are right there.
Thank you. All right, everybody, have a good evening. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye. Oh, you're welcome. There they go.
Yep, there they go. We got a lot of thank yous in the chat.
So that was a good one.
That was a very good one.
Very well attended.
Yes.
That's the most people I think in a long time. That's good.
Yeah, no, that was good.
They're so quiet, though. They're so quiet. I'm not used to that, but all right. Good night.
I was going to tell you something, and I can't remember what it was. Crap. And it was something kind of, oh my gosh.
Hey, I got this extra check. Was that because it's the quarter and I was getting paid for courses and flip books?
So you should have gotten your payout, yes, because it was quarterly.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. So every four months. So no, that wouldn't make quarterly. Every 3 months. Yeah. So I got it paid on the 15th. It was actually the 15th. One was paid the 14th.
Right,
one was paid the
and
15th. Okay.
And I should have told. I'm sorry. I should have told you that it was the 14th, because Kelly had said that they had to do yours in two. So
I figured it out. I figured that was it. I should know that. I should be able to divide by 4 and come up with 3.
Kelly goes. She goes. Okay. She again. We're on team meeting the other day. And she goes. Okay. She goes. Again, you guys are busy, and I'm like, yeah. And she's like, we've already, and I'm going to send out late notices right now, actually probably tomorrow, but she was like, yeah, we're already at like almost 23,000 for the month. And I was like,
wow.
Well, you got the, Andrea Suda paid for that rest of the year. So that came
okay.
What was, I don't know. I'll think about it and I'll text you.
Wow. All right. Bye.
Thank you, Miss Susan.
Thank you. It was good. Bye. Really good.
Okay, so I'm working on the goals right now, and they pretty much took out most of the goal that I had for reading. So I'm putting it back in there because I believe Taylor knows her letters, and I don't feel that she needs to identify her letters, which is what they have in their goal. Period. I want her working on her phonemic awareness sounds. I think she probably knows them, but do a quick little review of our phonic sounds and then start working on those CVC and CVCC words.